Calisthenics has a size problem for heavier calisthenics athletes. Today we're going to talk about the solution for heavyweight calisthenics athletes and how we can progress faster with our bigger frames, whether we're taller or whether we're thicker than the typical calisthenics athlete. My name is JD. I'm a 40-year-old hybrid athlete. I use calisthenics, weightlifting, and running as my primary modalities for training. And today I'm going to be running you through a workout with not only calisthenics, but also with weights. And I'm going to explain how this helps progress in calisthenics by supplementing weighted movements. In one of my recent videos, I spoke about how heavier and taller calisthenics athletes are at a disadvantage in comparison to our lighter and shorter counterparts. And this can be a very discouraging stumbling block when it comes down to bigger athletes starting their calisthenics journey. And this is one of the first truths that we have to come to grips with as heavier calisthenics athletes, is that our progress is not going to be as fast as some of the smaller calisthenics athletes who are contemporaries. I've got a friend who's about 5'9", 150 pounds. He's a hell of a calisthenics athlete, super explosive. His front lever's effortless. When he does muscle ups, it almost looks like he's flying. Now, he's a calisthenics purist. He doesn't use any weighted movements, and he looks at hitting the weights as cheating of some sorts. This calisthenics purist mindset is something that only the smaller calisthenics athletes can afford to have. If you're a heavyweight calisthenics athlete, if you're a bigger guy who's starting your calisthenics journey, you're going to need to scrap this mentality if you don't want to get stuck in the beginner phase. As a heavyweight in the calisthenics game, you're going to need to adopt a hybrid approach. This means supplementing weights, and to keep it real, you're going to need to have some form of cardio as well. Let's first talk about the weights though. Let's talk about a movement like the handstand push-up. It's basically an inverted overhead pressing movement. For a smaller athlete, going through the body weight progressions is probably good enough to progress at a fast pace. They don't have as much mass to move, and they have a much shorter range of motion. Now for you, the heavier guy, you got a 6 foot or taller frame, and you got about 200 pounds or more to move. This is exactly why supplementing something like an overhead press movement for your shoulder strength or dumbbell tricep extensions for your tricep strength is going to be a key ingredient for faster progress. Right now, my main training focus is this movement called the reverse muscle up. And for this movement, it's basically curling your body up using the gymnastics rings and getting into a handstand at the top of the movement. Now, my overhead press strength is already advanced, so the handstand push-up portion of the movement is relatively easy for me. My weak point is the curling motion. The movement almost requires you to curl your entire body weight. For me, this is where I had to stop being hard-headed and I had to start strategically training for this movement. I tried for months to use calisthenics progressions like pelican curls or just flat out trying to do the movement, trying to force myself into the movement. And I hit a hard plateau. And there's not really a lot of content on YouTube or on Instagram as far as tutorials or progressions for the reverse muscle up. But I stumbled upon this video by this channel called The Strength Project. And one of the guys on The Strength Project was showing this dumbbell movement that he was using to mimic the reverse muscle up. And basically, it just involved you taking some dumbbells, doing some supinated curls into an overhead pressing motion. So I started doing this movement and I felt like I was making some pretty good progress. But then I was just like, fuck it. Let me go ahead and get straight to the point. Let me go ahead and only focus on my weak point. And that's where I started doing these strict preacher curls. And the reason why I started doing these is because it's much easier to progressive overload and it's much easier to track your progress when it comes down to weighted movements than it is when you're using calisthenics movements. Honestly, one day in calisthenics, you might be able to hit a movement. Another day, you might not be able to hit a movement. When it comes down to the weights, where you're at is pretty much where you're at. And if you're getting stronger, it's going to show every single time you hit the gym. Another reason why it's easier to progressive overload with the weights is because you can take smaller steps. They got 2.5 pound plates that you can progressively overload with. They got 5 pound plates that you can progressively overload with. It really is straightforward. Since I've been hitting these weighted curls, I'm finally feeling like I'm creeping out of that plateau. I'm closer than ever to hitting that reverse muscle up, and I credit the progressive overloading with the preacher curls. You know, a lot of the times when it comes down to our progress with calisthenics, it's purely off vibes. And, you know, I think that's kind of one of the things that attracts a lot of people to calisthenics is that it's very vibe oriented. You go off of feel. You're not necessarily putting too much stress off of numbers, things of that nature. But that can also stall our progress. So for us heavyweight calisthenics athletes, we're going to want to use weights to supplement some of these movements, or at least supplement some accessories that are going to isolate our weak points. So when it comes down to trying to strengthen up our front delts, and we have weak front delts, we're going to want to use some type of overhead pressing motion like dumbbell shoulder press or barbell shoulder press. If we're training for the planche and we want to get our biceps stronger, we're going to want to supplement. And also, if we want to get our straight arm strength stronger, we're going to want to supplement with something like dumbbell or barbell planche press. Some people call it Zanetti press. One thing I do want to credit a lot of calisthenics athletes with is when they want to get stronger on their pulling strength, a lot of times you see them doing weighted pull-ups, or you see a lot of people doing weighted dips. So take that same weighted pull-up, weighted dip mentality and put that into some other weighted exercises in the gym. It'll be extremely beneficial for you. All right, so now that we talked about hitting the weights, let's talk about another problem that a lot of heavyweight calisthenics athletes have. And that's weight management. And this is the reason why all of us heavyweight calisthenics athletes, all of us bigger guys, need to have some sort of cardio routine in place. We all have larger frames. We all carry more weight than the smaller calisthenics athletes. Let's not put ourselves at more of a disadvantage by continuously gaining weight as we get stronger. For most of us, especially for those of us who are, not 21 years old anymore, for those of us who are probably 30 years old and older, whose metabolism probably has slowed down slightly, the diet's not going to be enough. Now, I'm 40 years old. I'm going to be 41 next month. And I can tell you, just having a clean diet is not good enough to keep the weight down. In order for us to keep our weight down and in order for us to keep our body fat percentage low, we're going to need to incorporate some sort of cardio. Now, my cardio of choice is running. And I know a lot of people do not like distance running. A lot of people don't like running in general. And that's fine. You don't need to be a marathon runner. You don't need to be a distance runner in order to do cardio. There's plenty of other options. A video that I did not too long ago, I talked about how one of my clients lost 30 pounds in 6 months and dropped his body fat percentage from 24% body fat all the way down to 13% body fat. He did not run at all. What he did was he did incline treadmill work. That's walking on an incline on the treadmill, and he's also a cyclist. So he would cycle on the weekends, do incline treadmill during the week, along with a clean diet, and the man lost 30 pounds, dropped his body fat percentage down tremendously. So in place of running, you could do incline treadmill, you could do some cycling, you could play some hoops. I know this isn't steady state cardio, but you can also do some sprints. You want to get some intensity in. You want to get that heart rate up, preferably keeping that heart rate up for over 20 minutes. Whatever your form of cardio that you choose, just make sure that form of cardio is sustainable and is something that you can do 3 or 4 times per week. So I run 2 to 3 times per week, but even on the days that I'm not running, I try to get at least 15,000 steps in per day. That's another easy hack to keep your weight in check, and another easy hack to keep your body fat in check is make sure that you're getting about 15,000 steps per day. I know a lot of people say you got to get at least 10K steps per day. 10K steps is the bare minimum. You should really be shooting to get 15, and if you have time, get 20,000 steps in per day. And by all means, if you're just trying to generally be healthy, it's all good. You don't need to do these extreme measures to keep your weight and your body fat down. I don't really even view this as extreme. But when it comes down to calisthenics, being 20% body fat or even higher than that is going to get you absolutely nowhere in calisthenics. And I don't even view 20% as a terrible body fat percentage to be in. You could be 20% body fat and still be extremely strong in the weight room. But when it comes down to relative strength, when it comes down to having that body weight mastery and controlling your body, through space, you're going to need to be around 15% body fat or even lower than that. So when it comes down to being a heavyweight calisthenics athlete, when it comes down to those of us who are, let's say 5'10" and above, let's say 185 pounds and above, we're going to have to take the unconventional path when it comes down to training. We're going to have to make sure that we're using every resource available to us to get stronger, to get more control, and to eventually master our body. That's what we're going to need to master calisthenics. Now, if you guys don't know where to start, or even if you guys are someone who's hit a hard plateau, go to my website, hybridathlete40.com, take the intake assessment, and book a consultation with me. If you qualify for online coaching, we can do some coaching. Or if I think a program will be good for you, I can recommend a program to you. It's a lot easier if you're not just trying to figure this stuff out on your own. Guidance is always something that's going to help, especially when you're going the unconventional path. The unconventional path in calisthenics is doing it at a heavier body weight and being taller, but you can't look at this as a negative. Like I said in my previous videos, once we're able to master whatever skill that we're working on, once we're able to get to a high level in calisthenics, it's only going to look more impressive if we're a heavier and taller calisthenics athlete. If you're somebody who's 6'2" and 190 pounds, or 6'2" and 105 or 205 pounds, and you're able to do high-level calisthenics movements like handstand push-ups, 90-degree handstand push-ups, front levers, or maybe even a straddle planche, that's going to look extremely impressive. It's going to be more impressive than when you see these 5'4" guys that are 115 pounds doing 2-finger planches. That stuff is great and is very impressive, but at the end of the day, I look at that as them having an unfair advantage when it comes down to a movement practice like calisthenics. And that's all well and good, because at the end of the day, those of us who are heavyweight calisthenics athletes have a more advantage when it comes down to other sports like football, basketball, so on and so forth. Now, for those of you guys who've gotten some value out of this video, go ahead and like the video, subscribe to the channel. We're almost to 20,000 subscribers. That's going to be a huge accomplishment for me. I'd love to have you guys a part of this hybrid athlete community. And for those of you guys who are also heavyweight calisthenics athletes, go ahead and comment in the comment section how tall you are, how heavy you are, and some of the calisthenics movements you've been able to unlock. I think this is a good opportunity for other heavyweight calisthenics athletes to see that it's possible for them to unlock high-level movements in this movement practice that isn't necessarily set up for us to win. But anyways, guys, I hope everybody's having a great day out there. I'll holler at you guys later. Peace.